the, it wasn't quite a text message, but on the subject of like difficult and awkward conversations, we learned today that Joe Biden had a half-hour conversation with Benjamin Netanyahu, the leader of Israel, where he really sounds like he sort of read the Riot Act to Netanyahu, linked, I think, to this increasing number of civilian deaths, which is absolutely appalling that we're seeing in Gaza. Becca, this is quite a big move by America. It is traditionally the most staunch ally of Israel. It does seem like they're beginning to pull back from that.
Yeah, I think you're completely right. I think it's really significant. You know, their relationship has been kind of incredibly solid. And for this conversation to have been briefed, I think it was described as tense. I think it shows that the US are, positioning itself further and further away from how Netanyahu is conducting himself in Gaza. As you say, we've had the appalling deaths of the 7 aid workers, the 30,000 deaths of Gazan civilians with no seeming any ambition to lighten up or alleviate the bombardment. I think this is really significant. Whether Netanyahu heeds the advice of the US, I think will be yet to be seen.
Well, we've started
to see, isolated.
We've started to see this morning, Becca, haven't we, that
the increased aid. Yeah,
Israel has opened up, I think, opened up a port and opened up a land bridge to enable aid to come into Gaza. I mean, Matthew, the appalling human tragedy. We've almost become slightly desensitised to it because it's just on our screens every day. But we hear that a famine is about to take hold in Gaza. We hear, children dying. I think this is a welcome move from the States.
I think it's a hugely welcome move. And thank goodness that Joe Biden read the Riot Act. And I think the thing is that the Americans have been ratcheting up the pressure even before this week's tragic death of the aid workers. But it hasn't worked because Netanyahu is basically the most stubborn person in the world. He's getting a lot of pressure inside Israel for potentially losing American support. So therefore, that mixture of the pressure, there have been massive demonstrations outside the Knesset, the Israeli parliament, over the past week. A mixture of pressure at home, particularly his coalition partner is trying to force him into early elections, which he would likely do very badly in. He's significantly behind in the polls, so the last thing he wants is an election. He's using the excuse that you don't want to have an election during the war to try and hold those off. So a mixture of the pressure at home and this pressure from Biden has really made a difference.
But this is a big change because particularly in an election year, there's a significant Jewish population in the United States of America. To sort of take on Israel in this way isn't usual, particularly in an election year, to see from an American president.
Absolutely. Although there is one interesting thing about American electoral politics. We talk here about the impact of the Muslim vote. And although it's a percentage of the American population, Muslims are much smaller. They're very concentrated in a couple of key states, particularly in Michigan, the Rust Belt state, where they have significant numbers and significant political power. And that's a state that Biden has to win if he's going to win the presidency. So there's a mixture of both, although numbers are smaller, of political pressure from both pro-Palestinian forces, both Muslim voters, but also, of course, Liberal Democrats as well.
And Becca, we've seen a bit of a movement from our Foreign Secretary, David Cameron. He's certainly toughened up his language. But it plays into this bigger question. The United Kingdom sells arms to Israel. In fact, it's a very, very small part of our arms sale. I believe, reading the papers today, the biggest seller of arms to Israel is actually Qatar. Is there increasing political pressure in the United Kingdom for an arms embargo, if you like, the withdrawal of these export licence for arms going to Israel to prosecute?
Yeah, I think we're really seeing that. I think, like you say, I think it's about 42 million quid's worth of arms that we sell, so a tiny, tiny percentage of what we export. But the significance of that and this suggestion that, we're almost complicit now in what we're seeing in Gaza by aiding Israel in its bombardment. I think absolutely there's political pressure. Cameron, has always kind of stepped a little further than Sunak, hasn't he? I think he's always been slightly more kind of bullish about in condemning Israel, and I think we are seeing staggering pressure mounting. We've had the letters written, and also public sentiment. Those poor aid workers whose photographs were splashed all over our front pages.
And their families are speaking out.
Families, yeah. Exactly. I think the public sentiment is shifting, and I would hope very much that we see it reflected in how we.
And we've seen Alicia Cairns, the Tory MP who chairs the Commons Foreign Affairs Committee this morning, being absolutely adamant that arms sales need to stop, and in fact launching an attack on Suella Braverman, the former Home Secretary, who's in Israel at the moment, sort of condemning her for saying, because that Suella had been saying, oh, I can see some aid going in, and making it quite a sort of internal political battle within the Tories.
Just very finally on this point, I understand from this phone call, the brief out of this phone call is that America is apparently considering whether it can withhold weapons from Israel. Rebecca, I just want to pick up very brief on this. There was, of course, a story yesterday that some UK civil servants are thinking that they're going to refuse to process export licences for Israel, say they're concerned that that may breach international law. Now, that is something new, and I think it's quite interesting for our viewers and listeners at home because, of course, civil servants are there to implement the wishes of the government, whoever that may be from time to time. What do you think about this sort of civil service activism we're seeing in this space?
Well, I always wouldn't call that activism. You know, they do not want to be involved in something that is potentially, you know, contravening and breaking humanitarian law. So I think that needs to be established. And I think it is well within the rights of the civil service to ensure this government is acting within the bounds of international law. So I wouldn't call it sort of politicised or activism. I think actually it's kind of ensuring that this government is adhering to international protocols that we're supposed to kind of be.
I think we need to see the advice, and then if the advice says it's against international law, then they would have a reason for not doing it. I think they're getting in a little bit early, but it looks like the pressure on Cameron to release this updated legal advice is going to grow over the next few days.